Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Billy Abbott's world had been spiraling out of control for weeks, but nothing could have prepared him, or his brother Jack, for the firestorm of betrayal, heartbreak, and shocking revelations that were about to be unleashed when Billy finally revealed the DNA results that he had been sitting on. Results that not only rocked Jack's entire sense of identity but also exposed Jill Abbott as the ultimate betrayer in the tangled web of the Abbott family legacy, because for years Jack had believed that the foundation of his life, his position as patriarch of the Abbott clan, and his rightful inheritance of John Abbott's legacy were unshakable truths, yet Billy's relentless search for answers had uncovered cracks in the story that Jill had long buried, and now, with one manila envelope in his hand and fury in his eyes, Billy dropped the truth on Jack like a nuclear bomb, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage, triumph, and guilt as he told his brother that the DNA test proved Jack Abbott was not, in fact, John Abbott's biological son, but the child of another man entirely, a revelation that left Jack stunned, speechless, and utterly broken in that instant, while Jill, who had been maneuvering in the shadows for decades, suddenly found herself dragged into the harsh light of exposure, her carefully curated lies unraveling before the entire family, because what Billy had discovered was not just a mistake in paperwork or a rumor passed down through whispers, but scientific proof. Backed by undeniable evidence that Jill had engineered one of the greatest cover-ups in Genoa city history, concealing the true parentage of Jack Abbott to protect her own interests and to manipulate the balance of power within the Abbott and Chancellor empires, and as the gravity of Billy's revelation sank in, Jack staggered back, his hands trembling, his voice hoarse as he demanded to know how Billy could have done this, why he had felt the need to dig into the past, why he couldn't just leave buried secrets buried, and Billy, his own heart heavy with conflicted emotions, admitted that part of him had hoped to prove once and for all that he was as much John Abbott's son as Jack was, because deep down Billy had always struggled with being the screw-up, the black sheep, the one who could never measure up, and when whispers of Jill's betrayal reached his ears, he couldn't resist the urge to dig deeper, never imagining that he would uncover a truth so explosive that it would detonate the entire Abbott family dynamic, and Jill's reaction only confirmed the depth of her guilt, because instead of indignation or disbelief, she tried to pivot, to spin, to justify her actions as if rewriting the narrative could undo the damage, but her excuses fell flat as Jack's face twisted with anguish and rage, because in that moment he realized that his entire life had been shaped by a lie, that his claim to John Abbott's legacy, the company he bled for, the family he had tried to hold together, and the sense of belonging he had clung to were all founded on deception, and Billy, though he had delivered the devastating truth, wasn't gloating or reveling in victory, because he knew this wasn't just about exposing Jill's betrayal or knocking Jack off his pedestal. It was about shattering illusions and forcing everyone to face the consequences of secrets that should have come out decades earlier. But what made the betrayal sting even deeper was that Jill had not acted out of love or to protect anyone but herself. She had manipulated Jack's identity to secure her own position, to keep her influence in the Abbott Chancellor orbit strong, and to play her endless games of power. And now that the truth was out, the fallout threatened to tear apart not just the Abbott family but also Chancellor Winters, Jabot, and every alliance connected to them, because Jack's legitimacy as an Abbott heir was suddenly in question, his authority challenged, his very name stripped of the certainty it once carried, while Jill, cornered and desperate, lashed out at Billy for exposing her, accusing him of selfishness, recklessness, and cruelty, but her words couldn't mask the reality that she had orchestrated this betrayal, and Jack, devastated, turned his fury not just on Jill but also on Billy, shouting that while Jill may have started this chain of lies, Billy had chosen the most brutal way possible to deliver the truth, as if he had been waiting for the perfect moment to strike, to finally knock Jack down a peg, and though Billy protested that he hadn't wanted to hurt his brother, that the truth had a way of coming out whether anyone wanted it to or not, the damage was already done, because Jack's heart was splintered, his sense of self obliterated, and the Abbott family legacy left hanging in the balance, with Ashley, Tracy, Kyle, and the rest of the clan reeling from the aftershocks of the revelation, each of them forced to grapple with what it meant for their family, their company, and their future, and while Jill scrambled to regain control, spinning half-truths and trying to justify her betrayal as something done to protect Jack from a harsher reality, no one was buying it, because the evidence in Billy's hands spoke louder than her words, and in that moment Jill stood exposed as the ultimate betrayer, the woman who had not only manipulated her own life for advantage but also ripped apart the foundation of a family for her own gain, and though Billy had been the one to deliver the blow, the true weight of destruction fell on Jill, whose years of scheming had finally caught up to her, and as Jack staggered out of the room, his world collapsing, Billy stood in the wreckage, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again, because in exposing Jill's ultimate betrayal, he had unleashed a storm that would forever alter the Abbott family, their legacy, and their future in Genoa City. But the Abbott saga didn't stop unraveling with the initial DNA bombshell, because the fallout spread like wildfire through Genoa City, touching every corner of Jack's personal and professional life, and Billy, though still grappling with guilt and anger, found himself unable to pull back now that the truth had been exposed, because the Abbott family had lived for too long under illusions that were bound to shatter eventually, and Jill's ultimate betrayal had forced everyone to look at themselves and their relationships in a new, brutal light, beginning with Jack, who retreated to the Abbott mansion, shutting himself away in John's old study where memories of his father's guidance, love, and expectations clashed violently with the cruel knowledge that John Abbott wasn't his father at all, and Jack, staring at the framed photo of John on the desk, whispered through tears that everything he had ever done, every sacrifice, every fight to protect Chabot, every battle to keep his family together, had been for nothing, because the man he loved as a father had never truly been his blood, and that realization shook him to his very core, sending him spiraling into a depression so deep that even Diane and Kyle, who tried to comfort him, were left helpless as he refused to accept their reassurances that family wasn't about blood but about love and commitment, because Jack's entire identity had always been tied to being John Abbott's son, the leader of the Abbott family, and without that foundation he felt hollow, unmoored, and utterly lost. And as word of Billy's revelation spread, the rest of the Abbott clan reacted with shock and outrage, with Ashley furious at Billy for blindsiding Jack in such a cruel way, Tracy heartbroken at the thought of losing the brother she had always adored to despair, and Kyle terrified about what this meant for his own future, because if Jack wasn't truly an Abbott, what did that mean for Kyle's position in the family and at Chabot? And though Kyle tried to reassure his father that he would always stand by him, Jack couldn't help but feel the icy hand of insecurity creeping over him, whispering that he no longer had any rightful claim to the Abbott name or the company his so-called father built, and Jill, cornered and desperate, launched into full damage control mode, calling private meetings with family members, trying to spin her decades-long deception as an act of mercy, claiming that she had kept Jack's true parentage hidden to protect him from a truth that would have destroyed him earlier in life, but her excuses rang hollow, especially to Ashley, who spat that Jill had only done it to maintain leverage, to control the balance of power in the Abbott Chancellor orbit, and to keep John's legacy tied to her manipulative hands. And the more Jill tried to defend herself, the more isolated she became, as even Chance, who had once defended his grandmother through countless scandals, struggled to look her in the eye, torn between loyalty and disgust, and Billy, watching the chaos unfold, realized that he had become both executioner and victim in this drama, because while he had exposed Jill's betrayal and finally forced the truth into the open, he had also destroyed what little trust Jack had left in him, and their brotherly bond, which had always been shaky, was now shattered beyond repair, with Jack accusing Billy of relishing the opportunity to humiliate him, to finally knock the golden sun from his pedestal, and though Billy tried to insist that he had only wanted the truth, that he had been seeking answers for himself, his words fell flat against Jack's devastation, because the timing, the manner, and the public nature of the reveal made it impossible to believe that Billy hadn't wanted to score points, to strike back after years of feeling second best, and as the days went on, the revelation began to bleed into the business world, with Chabot shareholders quietly questioning whether Jack's leadership could remain credible now that his identity as John Abbott's heir was in question, and rival companies like Newman Enterprises and Chancellor Winters sensing weakness, circling like sharks, waiting to exploit the chaos, while Jill, desperate to protect her own standing, reached out to Victor Newman in a last-ditch attempt to form an alliance, but Victor, ever the opportunist, made it clear that he wasn't going to save her, smirking as he told her that Abbott family drama was none of his concern, unless, of course, it created openings for him to seize more power, and Jill realized with dread that she had overplayed her hand and had no allies left, because her betrayal had poisoned every relationship she had, leaving her stranded and reviled, while Jack, still drowning in despair, found himself haunted by questions about his true father's identity, questions that gnawed at him in the silence of sleepless nights, because if John wasn't his father, then who was, and why had Jill gone to such lengths to hide it, and though part of him wanted to let it go, to bury the truth and salvage what was left of his life, another part of him burned with the need to know, to reclaim some piece of identity that was his and his alone, and so Jack, with trembling resolve, decided to dig deeper, to uncover the name Jill had worked so hard to erase, but in doing so, he risked uncovering even darker secrets that could destroy not only himself but also the fragile remnants of his family, because Jill's betrayal wasn't just a one-off lie, it was part of a larger web of deception that stretched back decades, entwining the Abbotts, the Chancellors, and even the Newmans in ways no one had yet imagined, and as Billy watched his brother unravel, he was forced to confront the reality that in exposing the truth, he had set in motion a chain of events that could consume them all, because Jill's ultimate betrayal wasn't just about one man's paternity, it was about power, legacy, and the lies people tell to secure their place in history, and now that those lies had been dragged into the light, nothing, not family loyalty, not love, not even blood itself, would ever be enough to put the Abbott family back together again. The storm that Billy had unleashed didn't slow, it gathered strength like a hurricane, tearing apart every foundation the Abbott family had clung to, and as Jack tried to hold himself together, his obsession with finding the truth about his real father grew stronger by the day, because no matter how many times Tracy or Diane or even Kyle assured him that blood didn't define him, that his love and loyalty to John Abbott had made him more of a son than any DNA ever could, Jack couldn't silence the gnawing voice in his mind telling him that he was living half a life without knowing his origins, and so, in a moment of private desperation, he returned to the box of documents Billy had gathered during his DNA search, poring over old medical records, hospital files, and snippets of information that pointed to something Jill had worked tirelessly to bury, and though the clues were scarce, one name began to surface repeatedly, a man tied to Genoa City's past, someone who had once moved in the same circles as Dina Murtron and Catherine Chancellor, and the possibility that his true father might be a powerful, connected figure both thrilled and horrified Jack, because if it were true, then Jill hadn't just betrayed him with lies of omission, she had deliberately kept him from knowing that his real bloodline might have opened doors or created opportunities that she instead hoarded for herself, and as Jack's investigation deepened, Jill began to panic, because she knew exactly where the trail would lead if Jack kept digging, and she couldn't allow the truth to come out, not just because it would ruin her reputation completely, but because the man in question was someone whose connection to the Abbott family would create chaos that could never be contained, so Jill launched a desperate campaign to stop Jack, first by trying to appeal to his emotions, reminding him of the pain he was already in and urging him not to drag himself deeper into despair, then by attempting to blackmail Billy into destroying the documents, but Billy, for once, stood firm, refusing to cover for her any longer, because he had finally seen just how much destruction Jill's lies had caused, and he wasn't going to be her accomplice again, and when those tactics failed, Jill turned to her last weapon, threats, warning Jack that if he kept digging, he would uncover something far worse than he could imagine, something that would not only destroy him but the entire Abbott family, and while her words rattled him, they also fueled his determination, because Jack was tired of living in the shadows of half-truths and manipulation, and he vowed that he would uncover his real father's name no matter the cost, and meanwhile, the rest of Genoa City watched the Abbott implosion with a mixture of fascination and unease, with Victor Newman smirking at every headline, quietly maneuvering to exploit Jabot's weakened position, while Devon and Lily at Chancellor Winters whispered behind closed doors about how Jill's credibility had been decimated and how the fallout might allow them to seize greater control of the company she had once dominated, and Ashley, though furious at Billy for detonating the family's secrets so recklessly, couldn't help but share Jack's determination to find out the truth, because even though she despised Jill and her manipulations, Ashley had always believed that the Abbott family deserved honesty, no matter how painful, and so she quietly aligned herself with her brother, helping him track down old records, calling in favors, and digging into connections Jill had thought long dead, and the deeper they dug, the clearer it became that Jill's betrayal wasn't just personal, it was calculated, tied to old rivalries and corporate wars that had shaped the very fabric of Genoa City, and with every piece of the puzzle Jack uncovered, Jill's desperation grew, until she finally broke down and confessed to Billy in a private confrontation that she hadn't just lied about Jack's father out of greed or selfishness, but because the truth tied the Abbotts to a man who had once been Catherine Chancellor's greatest enemy, a revelation that, if made public, could tear apart not only the Abbott legacy but also the Chancellor one, and though Jill tried to spin this as proof that she had acted out of loyalty to protect both families, Billy wasn't buying it, pointing out that Jill had always been Catherine's rival first and foremost, and if she had really cared about protecting anyone, she would have found a way to tell the truth decades ago, instead of letting Jack live a lie for his entire life, and though Jill begged Billy to stay silent, to keep Jack from pursuing the trail any further, Billy refused, insisting that Jack had the right to know no matter how ugly the truth was, and so the stage was set for an even bigger explosion, because Jack, now armed with pieces of the puzzle Jill had fought so hard to bury, was about to uncover the identity of the man who had fathered him, a man whose name would reverberate through Genoa City with consequences no one could predict, and as Jill sat alone, her carefully built empire of lies collapsing around her, she realized that in trying to control everything, she had lost the one thing that mattered most, her family's trust, and that Billy, the son she had so often underestimated and tried to manipulate, had become her greatest undoing, because his refusal to back down had not only exposed her but set in motion a chain of events that would ensure Jill Abbott's name would forever be remembered not as a matriarch or a survivor, but as the ultimate betrayer of the Abbott family legacy. As the tension reached a breaking point, Jack's determination to uncover his real father's identity consumed him like an obsession, driving him deeper into a labyrinth of old records, faded photographs, and whispered stories from Genoa City's past, while Jill, growing increasingly frantic, tried to sabotage every lead he uncovered, but the harder she pushed, the more Jack's suspicions solidified that she wasn't just hiding a name, she was protecting a legacy that could explode if exposed, and Ashley, sensing her brother's fragile state, hovered between supporting him and fearing that the truth would destroy him completely, while Billy, caught between guilt and resolve, urged Jack to brace himself, warning that sometimes the truth wasn't worth the cost, but Jack, with tears in his eyes, whispered that he had already lost everything, his identity, his sense of belonging, even his faith in Jill, and the only thing left was to reclaim what had been stolen from him, and so, late one night, Jack followed a trail of documents Jill hadn't managed to erase, his hands shaking as he opened a faded envelope from a private hospital, the name inside sending shockwaves through him, a name tied not just to his past but to the very fabric of Genoa City, someone whose blood ran through the city's history like a vein of both power and poison, and as Jack whispered the name aloud, his voice trembling, Jill appeared in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes wild with panic, begging him to stop, to tear up the paper before it ruined everything, but Jack clutched the document to his chest, his anger burning hotter than it ever had before, because in that instant he knew that Jill's betrayal was even greater than he had imagined. Not only had she lied about who he was, she had deliberately severed him from a truth that could have changed everything, and now, standing on the precipice of revelation, Jack swore that no matter how devastating the fallout, the world would know who his real father was, even if it meant destroying the last shreds of his family in the process.